The Sonic games on the Genesis are still to this day some of the most iconic games ever made. When it came to the successor of the Genesis, the Saturn, a new mainline Sonic game should have been a shoo-in, right? Well, in this case, not really. The Saturn will only see 3 Sonic-related releases: Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic Jam, and Sonic R, and none of them were a new mainline Sonic game. On the hardware front, Sega did release a Sonic-themed limited edition console. However, it's extremely rare and was limited to Japanese Toys R Us stores only. I was contemplating buying one, but for the asking price, it just didn't do enough for me. So I did the next best thing. I made my own. So before we get started, let's have a word from today's sponsor, PCBwave. Did you know that you can have prototype PCBs made for as little as $5 plus shipping? That's right, for $5 you can have 10 PCBs manufactured and sent to you. Best part is, if you get the green solder mask, turnaround time is only 24 hours. So check out PCBwave, link is in the description, and thank you to PCBwave for sponsoring this video. So the base model of what we're starting with is a Japanese Model 2 Sega Saturn. The console isn't in the best condition, but that doesn't really matter much as my buddy Pucho Magic is going to make it look absolutely awesome. So without any further delay, let's rip this thing open. With the console disassembled, I'm going to send the shell to Pucho to get it polished up and looking real nice.
Wax on, right hand. Wax off, left hand. Wax on, wax off. Breathe.
As for me, there's 3 mods that I'm going to do to this console. The first is installing a region-free BIOS, the next is an FRAM mod, and the last is to install a Phoebe. Now there's a bit of redundancy between the region-free BIOS and the Phoebe, but as long as I have it open, I might as well install the region-free BIOS, and you never know when I want to swap between a disk drive and the Phoebe. Dropping in a region-free BIOS into a Saturn isn't too bad, it's just a matter of having the right tools for the job and taking your time throughout the process. The part that's a little bit screwy is when it comes time to actually soldering in the new region-free BIOS, as the footprint of the chip is technically larger than the original BIOS. While I didn't show it here, my preference is to turn the chip into an SOJ chip and solder in like that. That way you've got maximum amount of room between the legs and the actual pads of where the region-free BIOS needs to be soldered in. Next up is the FRAM mod. So to give you a bit of background on what the mod does, it's important to understand how the SRAM in the Saturn actually works. Basically, the Saturn's internal memory is tied to the CR2032 battery on the motherboard. The problem is, the real-time clock in the console is also tied to that exact same battery. And the biggest problem lies with the real-time clock, as it loves to eat batteries. And when the batteries die, your game saves die with it.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
The FRAM mod will allow for your game saves to still be there when the battery inevitably dies. Overall, it's a pretty easy mod to install. As long as you have a hot air rework station, you should be good to go. The final mod we're going to install into this console is a Phoebe. The Phoebe is an optical drive emulator, or ODE for short. This uses an FPGA to simulate the CD drive and allows you to boot games and homebrew from an SD card. Just a fair warning to all those DIYers out there, make sure you follow the instructions because there is some soldering required and it is not plug and play. Shout out to my buddy Eric for making sure I got one of these, as getting one is actually ridiculously difficult and paying the prices on eBay is kind of crazy. I also want to give a shout out to Chris for helping me get everything set up on the software end. Unfortunately with this ODE, the files need to be either in a clone CD format or an alcohol format to work properly. So using his advice, I re-ripped my collection. With all the mods complete, the only thing left to do is montage through the reassembly process and do some testing. So with the console reassembled, I'm going to drop in my 32 gig SD card into the console and boot it up. And sure enough, I'm greeted with this, which is the menu system for the Phoebe. And I've got it kind of organized with my collection, and I've kind of just put what each kind of game type is just to make it a little bit easier. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is Vampire Savior. Now this is an awesome fighting game made by Capcom. It's actually probably my favorite fighting game on the Sega Saturn. It requires the 4 meg cart. The graphics on it look absolutely fantastic. I love the pixel art. I'm still begging for a sequel to this game myself, but hey, this one plays absolutely perfect on this console. Did I mention I like fighting games? Next up I'm throwing in Marvel vs. Street Fighter. It plays absolutely perfectly as well, and if you are a fan of Marvel vs. Capcom, this game right here is the roots of that game. Finally, I threw in Sonic Jam, and I threw in Sonic Jam just to kind of pull this all full circle. Within Sonic Jam, there's something called Sonic World. And Sonic World is the equivalency of a 3D roaming Sonic game, and you can just run through the level. And it's interesting because eventually this was the bedrock of Sonic Adventure. It just goes to show you, had Sonic Team maybe been in charge the entire time, and a mainline Sonic game came out on the Sega Saturn, this very well might have been a preview of what we would have gotten. Overall, this project turned out absolutely amazing. And let's be very clear, Pucho did an amazing job painting this console. It is literally like glass. Now this is the Sonic limited edition console that should have came out for the Sega Saturn. Guys, do me a favor, check out Pucho on Instagram and check out his Etsy store. Links are in the description below. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you for the next one here soon.